Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Code Red, the podcast. My name is Casey. Today with me, I've got Brady.
Hey.
And I got Dan.
Howdy.
And on this podcast, we're going to talk security. To get us kickstarted for the first few episodes, we have the bowl of security topics, gentlemen. I've put together some stuff on there. Written some basic conversation starters down, a couple of different prompts. So there's some surprises in there. Well, we're going to have a little fun. You guys ready to go?
Yeah,
All right, perfect. So let's pick our first security topic. We're not going to do this one. I don't know why I put that one in there at all. Here we go. So actually, this is funny. This one's going to require us to take a little bit more of a pro and con debate structure. It's actually multi-vendor versus single vendor approach when it comes to security tools, right? Consolidation versus not. So what I will do is I'll assign you each a side, and I don't know, give you 5 minutes to go work on it, come back, and we will pick up recording from there. Sound good? So I'm going to give Dan, actually I'm going to let you pick since you're a senior.
Give me the opportunity to pick.
Age before beauty,
As they say. Multi-vendor.
You're going to take multi-vendor. That leaves you with single vendor. So we will take 5 minutes, write down some points. I'll give you some topic starters as well, and then we can come back.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome back. That was a quick 5 minutes, and I think we're ready to roll. So let's start. I gave you some categories and some conversation starters. Not to spoil it, but let's just go with an overall why single vendor approach. I'll let Dan go first because, again, age before beauty.
As always. Yeah, thanks, Casey. So from a multi-vendor perspective, what I often hear and what I'd put into this conversation is saying that, you know, all these different organizations within an IT company, like an IT organization, right? They all have tools and procedures, systems in place that they're comfortable around, right? You have managers, individual contributors that are accustomed to certain tools that they may have had for quite a while, or that they recently have acquired and they're very comfortable with. So what I often hear from the multi-vendor perspective, and what I'd say is that multiple vendors allow teams to be autonomous, right? They allow themselves to pick what vendors and what technologies, what features, meet the requirements of what they're trying to achieve. So oftentimes that's kind of what I hear from a multi-vendor perspective. That's not to say that connecting those vendors' products into a single platform like a SOC or a SIM tool isn't essential. We obviously cannot rely on siloed approaches to security at all. We need to be able to make some sense of what we're looking at. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I would respond to that would be that I think that not it kind of goes beyond convenience. I think using a single solution from a comprehensive platform, it goes beyond what it provides goes beyond convenience to me, because it's almost like a more holistic approach to build your security environment, because your team isn't, these programs aren't always like top down architectures, where it's coming from an architect on the top. It's sometimes, your team is going to be able to explore this platform, see new tools in the platform that they might benefit from. And I think that discovery process is very beneficial to growing businesses.
But don't you think there's a little bit of risk when you're an organization and you're picking up a single vendor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so in terms of risk, not all companies are the same. That's what I would respond to that with. I mean, if I was forced to make a decision, I think that a company with a thorough security program that's deals with companies bigger than you, smaller than you, all over the world, those type of things, really knowing the ins and outs of how to mitigate those risks that come along with being a vendor. I think that company's worth its weight in gold, as opposed to having to, pick half a dozen single layer point solutions from startups that have only been in business for a few years,
But at the same time, there's many of these older legacy operators that are out there that happen to end up having either, a breach or some kind of supply chain issue with their software, right? Staying up to date with these single vendors, or even single vendors that acquire other technologies, are often put at a little bit of a disadvantage, don't you think?
Well, it's less of an attack surface area, though, because I think one company versus a half a dozen companies or a dozen companies is probably less of an attack surface area to have to deal with. You can get to know the risk very well in that sense. I think, and I think, again, I think that developing a good relationship with a vendor like that is extremely valuable.
Okay. Do you think that from a multi-vendor perspective, I'm mitigating risk from my perspective by incorporating all these other technologies and vendors into the ecosystem? So if I have to go in and say, for example, my endpoint product, has a severe vulnerability in it, I can go in and say, maybe my email vendor has a product or an endpoint product for me to utilize. I can go in and take a look at that.
Yeah, does it not get kind of exhausting having to, who's going to retrain all those people to use the new product? Like that's a fair question to ask.
I mean, he's got a point, right? So you come up with all these other different products. Now suddenly you have to teach Bob and Judy and the SOC how to manage.
It's expensive,
those, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't want to ever have to come into a situation where, and we hope everybody in the security field is hopefully building towards this standard of not needing to have to completely re-architect because an email product broke, right? That's something that you don't go into a security business and you don't become a vendor because you want to have that happen, right? So hopefully, and what I'd say from a multi-vendor perspective is to say, hey, you have these different multiple vendors in play within your environment, whether it be email, endpoint, network, all the different pieces there. And then what you could do with that is to say, if one fails, perhaps you can move another one in. Right?
Yeah, to me, honestly, it's not like, I don't know, maybe it's maybe it doesn't bother some people as much as it does others, but it just sounds exhausting to me to have to pick new partners every few years, that sort of thing. I think that, again, if you a reliable partner is worth their weight in gold in some ways, and it just sounds. I think that choosing a partner to grow with, to expand with, and that you can rely on rather than a collection of vendors. I think that's a good way to sort of frame it.
Now I'm gonna tag team with you here, Brady, onto Dan, right? So you mentioned you were swinging at Dan on vulnerabilities, right? Now if one of your multi vendors has vulnerability, I think in the past you've expressed, hey, let's just rip them out, replace, and to Dan's point, now you're suddenly not just replacing with that cost again, but now there's the cost of retraining. But on top of all that, when it comes time for renewal, because this isn't just a day one thing, to Brady's point, we're looking to create partnerships, right? Because after a year of using our tools, or a year of using any tool, you would hope that you'd have some institutional knowledge, and then year two is even easier to use, right? And then you're growing and adapting as any of the tools change, whether it's multiple vendors or a single vendor. But at the same time, let's call a spade here. In 2022 and moving forward, the future of security, at least as it sits now, is XDR, right? So typically in the market, we see vendors who cannot handle cross-platform detection and response natively, that they introduce partners that they can ingest the telemetry from. So if you were to move forward with that mixed ecosystem, right, then you have come up with a problem on renewal time where you have potentially outsized costs from that single vendor that maybe you really liked in that partnership. And sure, it's okay to pay more for the tool that you like, but eventually your costs run out of control. And I think we can all agree, the number one thing that we hear is that it's always too expensive. I don't have budget. They've got expected to secure an entire organization with bits of string and bubblegum, right?
But you don't think that from a multi-vendor perspective, it puts the customer at an advantage to have these different avenues of competition around their business? Because that's one of the things from my perspective, looking at customers that are going with the multi-vendor approach, that they're able to go and say, oh, I'm leaving this email vendor for XYZ reason, and then go and kick off a trial or something like that with another organization, and then obviously you're comparing features, requirements that you need for different qualifications, things of that nature. But
so you're basically saying when vendors compete, you win.
exactly.
Well,
I think that might be something to keep in mind with multi-vendors.
Definitely. And I was going to say, if it happens organically that you're saying, I'm not happy with this vendor and I want to move on to another one, that's fine. But I think eventually if you're playing that game, you're going to be compelled to change vendors at some point, because either the product's not going to be available, the prices are going to change, and your IT budget's going to float around a little bit more. Again, because you're also going to keep in mind you're going to lose a lot of buying power. Because I think, let's be realistic. If you spend more money with a company, with a vendor, or with a company, you're a more important customer. They'll answer your phone calls a little bit quicker.
That's really the perfect, counterpoint to that, right? When vendors compete, you win, but at the same time, when you're really important customer to that vendor, they're probably going to try to do more for you.
Yeah.
So listen, our producer Mark is waving his arms frantically at us. I don't know if you can see him behind all these fancy lights, but we don't need to apologize to him. He's behind the camera. So. But, clearly, at least two of us here's the dress code today and wore our Trend Micro t-shirts. And this is, or polos, I should say, and this is a Trend Micro podcast, right? So in case you weren't aware, our solution is effectively, or we'd like it to be as single vendor as possible, right? We do a number of different protection layers across enterprise, from endpoint, email, network, server, right? So we can do all of the blocking and tackling there. And then tying that all together is, of course,
Vision One,
right?
And I think that this is just, not to interrupt you, but I think that also it's worth mentioning that this is just the ecosystem today, and I think that it's definitely trending. That some of these platforms that not even just Trend Micro, a lot of companies are, but these platforms, what they're going to be in 3 to 5 years from now, are going to be pretty impressive. And I think that they're going to the components within these platforms are going to work together even better.
Very interesting. I mean, it's true, right? Some of the key things here are if you're breached, if you're underprotected, if you're misconfigured, organizations can get in, and they're clearly showing that they will, right? And what happens post-breach or post-intrusion or post-initial event really determines how bad it's going to be. Right? So a lot of the strength in the platform comes from that native telemetry, comes from understanding the feeds that are coming from your email product, from your network product, and be able to respond immediately, right? But I actually think that that's a topic in our bowl of security for a different day. So, hey, I don't know where we're going to end up publishing this, but as the cool kids today say, I think it's hit the
subscribe,
okay, comment,
and
hey, you could even sound off, right? You let us know if we're right on the money or wrong. If you've got a single vendor, multi-vendor approach, hey, please, let us know. We're happy.
More
to
arguments.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep arguing.
I'm going to break all these. I'm going to break this video up into 20-second bites, and they're all going to be on TikTok. So just look out for them.
And then you just point around like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I'm going to be dancing.
Well, for Brady, Dan, and myself, Casey, thanks for spending a little time with us in our very first episode of Code Red. See you out there.